Welcome back to the drowsy philosopher, where the noise of the day dissolves and the mind settles into its deeper currents. Before we descend into the world of Miyamoto Musashi, tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight, your city, your country, or the quiet corner you've chosen to rest in. Let the community see the map of calm we create together as we turn to one of history's most disciplined minds. Miyamoto Musashi wrote the Dokkōdō, The Path of Aloneness, in 1645, days before his death. He had already authored the Book of Five Rings, a foundational text in strategy and martial arts. But Dokkōdō was different. There's no reference to swordsmanship. Instead, it's Musashi stripping his worldview to a series of uncompromising principles designed for inner mastery rather than outer combat. Musashi did not romanticize solitude. He treated it as an operating condition, a clear-minded independence that prevents a person from being controlled by desire, fear, or opinion. His version of walking alone is not isolation. It is self-governance. Each principle is short but dense. To extract value from them, you need to consider two layers: the literal meaning, which tells you what he advises, the strategic meaning, which tells you why a man with absolute mastery chose this rule as essential. This video will move through all 21 principles in order, expanding each into psychological, philosophical, and practical terms that a modern listener can use. Principle 1. Accept everything just the way it is. Musashi begins with a demand for radical acceptance. This is not passive resignation. Acceptance, in Musashi's model, is a prerequisite for strategy. When you refuse to accept reality, you cannot act on it. A swordsman who denies the opponent's position dies. A thinker who denies circumstances becomes ineffective. Acceptance removes emotional distortion, no wishful thinking, no resentment, no clinging to how things should be, no narratives overlaying the situation. This principle forces a person into observational clarity. The strategic implications are straightforward. You cannot influence what you do not accurately perceive. To use this principle today, stop arguing with circumstances. Replace emotional reactions with a clean scan of the situation. Act only after reality is seen without commentary. Musashi starts here because mental clarity is the foundation for everything that follows. Principle 2. Detached. Do not seek pleasure for its own sake. This is not ascetic morality. It is about avoiding dependency. Pleasure pursued for its own sake turns the mind outward, searching for the next hit. A person governed by pleasure becomes easy to distract and easy to control. Musashi's view: if pleasure appears naturally, fine. If you chase it, you're training your mind to be pulled around by desire. Modern context: endless scrolling, compulsive novelty, hedonic consumption, sensory self-soothing. Anything that disrupts clarity and discipline. Strategic meaning: pleasure has a cost, attention. Where attention goes, autonomy reduces. Walking alone requires that you steer your inner state, not outsource it to stimulus. Principle 3. Do not, under any circumstances, depend on a partial feeling. Partial feeling means fragmented intuition, incomplete understanding, or emotional reasoning untested by clarity. Musashi warns against acting from a sensation that is not fully examined. In combat, a partial feeling is fatal. In daily life, it is how people misread situations, misjudge others, and miscalculate decisions. The application is simple. Pause before acting on impulse. Clarify motives, verify assumptions. Check whether your interpretation is complete or just emotionally convenient. This principle links directly to the first, clarity before movement. Principle 4. Think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world. Musashi attacks ego here. Think lightly of yourself equals reduce self-importance, not self-hatred, not humility theater, just a realistic understanding that your preferences, moods, and emotional narratives are not the center of reality. Think deeply of the world equals pay attention to external structures, systems, causes, patterns. Strategically, ego reduces awareness. Self-importance blinds a person to context. A warrior or a thinker who is self-focused becomes predictable and fragile. Replace self-concern with environmental awareness. It increases adaptability, calmness, and accuracy. Principle 5. Be detached from desire your whole life long. This is one of Musashi's hardest lines. Detachment is not refusal of desire. It is refusal of enslavement by desire. Desire is inevitable. But identification with desire, believing I must have this, creates inner instability. Musashi's method, let desires arise and fall without binding to them. Act from principles, not cravings. Adapted today. Don't let career ambition control your mood. Don't let relationships define your self-worth. Don't let financial desire dictate your identity. Don't let comfort-seeking override long-term objectives. The more your actions come from stable internal principles, the less volatility you experience. Principle 6. Do not regret what you have done. Musashi means do not indulge psychological looping. Regret freezes attention in the past, removing presence and weakening strategic thinking. There are only two productive paths. Correct the mistake if correction is possible. Integrate the lesson if correction is not. Everything else drains energy. Musashi's life was violent and complex. He killed many opponents, lost comrades, wandered alone for decades. Regret would have paralyzed him. His principle is simple. Once action is taken, shift all attention to what comes next. Principle 7. Never be jealous. Jealousy reveals attachment to comparison and scarcity. Musashi rejects both. Jealousy is strategically useless. It wastes attention. It distorts perception. It turns someone else's life into your reference point. It interrupts focus. Walking alone means anchoring your orientation internally, not in the status of others. Eliminate jealousy by cutting comparison at the root. It serves no tactical function. Principle 8. Do not regret what you have done. Regret is a self-inflicted wound. It consumes energy while offering nothing in return. It rewrites the past without changing it and drains the present without improving it. Musashi understood that regret is a luxury a warrior cannot afford. Once the blade is swung, the outcome is fixed. Once the choice is made, the only question that matters is, what now? In ordinary life, this principle is no less severe. People chain themselves to past decisions, a failed relationship, a poor career choice, a moment of weakness, a financial mistake. They replay the moment endlessly, believing that emotional self-flagellation somehow restores control. It doesn't. It only weakens you. The appropriate response is twofold. Extract the lesson with clarity, precision, and honesty. Advance immediately and decisively as if the lesson has already been absorbed into identity. Regret paralyzes because it's passive. Responsibility liberates because it's active. Musashi's instruction is not about avoiding remorse. It's about refusing to cling to emotional residues that slow movement. It is an injunction to cut cleanly. Thought, action, consequence, next step. Regret is attachment disguised as reflection. Musashi would have severed it without hesitation. Principle 9. Never be jealous. Jealousy is a distortion of attention. It pulls your eyes away from what you can build and fixes them on what another possesses. For Musashi, this would have been the height of foolishness. To envy another swordsman's skill instead of sharpening your own blade is to misunderstand the nature of mastery itself. In the modern world, jealousy has metastasized into something far more corrosive. Social media has turned comparison into a continuous background noise. Every achievement, every body, every lifestyle is presented as a metric against which you are silently judged. The result is a psychic exhaustion Musashi would have considered fatal. Jealousy stems from a belief that another person's success subtracts from your own. Mathematically false, psychologically suffocating, Musashi's antidote is simple. Focus entirely on your path, your capabilities, your tools, your growth. The only meaningful comparison is with your previous self. When jealousy arises, and it will, it should be treated as a signal. Your attention has drifted from your work. Pull it back, cut through the noise, return to the discipline. Envy is the emotion of the unfocused. Principle 10. Never let yourself be saddened by a separation. This principle is often misunderstood. It's not about indifference. It's about accepting that all relationships are impermanent, all connections transient. The warrior's life was defined by constant movement, one province to the next, one duel to another. Musashi witnessed death, loss, and the abrupt ending of friendships more often than any modern person ever will. To live effectively in such an environment, one must understand the nature of attachments. They form, they serve their purpose, they dissolve. Today the mechanism is different, but the principle remains. People cling to relationships long after they've ceased to be alive. They relive past closeness like a ghost haunting its former house. They resist the natural separation of paths, believing that permanence is a marker of meaning. Musashi's instruction is harsh. Do not mourn the shift. Accept it as part of the flow. This does not diminish affection, it sharpens it. Because when you know something will end, you pay attention while it's present. You engage fully. You appreciate the moment, not the illusion of continuity. Even the deepest bonds, partners, family, mentors, cannot escape the structure of impermanence. People change, the circumstances change. Life pulls individuals in different directions. Sadness is natural, but indulgence in sadness is not. Musashi's point is to avoid emotional stagnation. Move with the separation, not against it. You carry the lesson, not the longing. Principle 11. Resentment and complaint are appropriate neither for oneself nor others. Resentment is weakness wearing the costume of righteousness. It is the belief that the world should have behaved differently, and that by nurturing anger, you somehow correct it retroactively. For Musashi, resentment would have been unthinkable. A warrior does not resent an opponent's strength. He studies it, learns from it, exploits it. Resentment obscures perception. Clarity wins conflict. Complaining is even worse. Complaints declare, I am powerless, but I want someone else to fix it. Musashi's life was defined by radical agency. He began with nothing, no clan, no wealth, no advantage, and forged ability through effort, battle, and relentless practice. Complaining would have undermined every principle he lived by. In modern terms, resentment and complaint create psychological inertia. They teach the mind to outsource responsibility. They build a worldview in which external forces dictate internal states. A person who complains is not describing a problem. They are telling you they have surrendered. The alternative is precision. Identify the obstacle. Decide whether it is controllable. If controllable, act. If uncontrollable, adapt. No emotional leakage, no narrative of victimhood, no investment in grievance. Musashi rejected resentment because it wastes force. He rejected complaint because it weakens discipline. Both are forms of emotional self-indulgence masquerading as insight. A warrior trains his mind to remain unclouded. Resentment and complaint are fog. Cut through them. Principle 12. Be indifferent to where you live. Location should not govern your state. Musashi moved constantly. Battlefields, mountains, dojos, temples. His rule: your inner equilibrium must not be dependent on external environment. Applied now? Avoid telling yourself, I can only focus if I'm in X place. Build portability of discipline. Treat environment as neutral, not controlling. Autonomy over condition. Principle 13. Do not pursue the taste of good food. Again, not asceticism. It is about not letting sensory pleasure dictate behavior or identity. If a person becomes particular about sensory experience, they create unnecessary attachments and frustrations. Musashi keeps the body fueled, not indulged. Energy goes to clarity, not craving. Principle 14. Do not hold on to possessions you no longer need. Musashi isn't talking about decluttering houses. He's talking about decluttering identity. In Musashi's life, possessions were liabilities. Owning more meant carrying more. Carrying more meant reduced mobility. Reduced mobility meant vulnerability. But the deeper meaning is psychological, not logistical. Objects anchor self-concept. People project parts of their identity into what they own. The expensive clothes, the curated living space, the car that signals status, the objects that serve as emotional props, souvenirs that keep a person psychologically welded to a past version of themselves. Musashi's instruction is to sever that attachment. The underlying mechanics. Every possession you cling to is a silent claim about what you think you need to be stable. If you cannot let something go, that object owns you more than you own it. Take a modern example: when someone can't get rid of a particular item, an old jacket, a stack of notebooks, a digital archive, they're not resisting loss of utility. They're resisting the shift in identity that comes with letting the past be truly past. Musashi's rule is brutal but clean. Anything not essential to your functioning or values becomes ballast. Ballast slows movement, psychological movement most of all. Applied practically, reduce possessions that define you. Eliminate objects that bind you to old versions of yourself. Keep only what increases capability, clarity, or commitment. Every other item is a quiet form of self-limitation. Principle 15. Do not act following customary beliefs. This principle goes beyond rejecting tradition. Musashi is attacking unexamined assumptions. Customary beliefs means social conventions, expected behaviors, inherited thought patterns, collective habits that people follow because they're easier than thinking. cultural scripts taken as truth simply because they're familiar. Musashi is saying, do not let the collective mind become your mind. This is essential for walking alone. If you follow customs automatically, you are not living deliberately. You are a continuation of other people's patterns. In Musashi's world, customary beliefs governed everything. The etiquette of samurai houses, spiritual doctrines, rules of dueling, political allegiances, rigid hierarchy. Musashi broke nearly all of them. He fought duels outside the rules, trained outside formal schools, and rejected the expected trajectory of a warrior. He treated custom as a set of optional suggestions. The deeper psychological meaning, custom creates predictability, but predictability is rarely aligned with individuality or excellence. Living by custom is efficient short-term, but destructive long-term. It lowers the cost of decision-making at the price of profound personal stagnation. Modern application. Question the default path. Career, relationships, ambitions, lifestyle. Interrogate the assumptions behind phrases like, people my age should, or this is just how things are. Replace inherited beliefs with examined conclusions. Musashi's mandate is not rebellion for its own sake. It's strategic independence of thought. Principle 16. Do not collect weapons or practice with weapons beyond what is useful. This principle reveals Musashi's strategic minimalism. He was a master of over a dozen weapon types. He created his own school of swordsmanship. He fought with two swords simultaneously, but he understood a core truth. Breadth becomes dilution unless it serves depth. Collecting weapons symbolizes collecting tools without mastering them. Practicing unnecessarily complex skills becomes hobbyism disguised as discipline. Musashi teaches functional focus. Use only what increases capability. Reject what flatters ego or creates distraction. Applied psychologically, people today collect weapons in the form of productivity systems, gadgets, dash apps, courses, unnecessary skills, endless optimization projects. Most of this is avoidance masquerading as preparation. Use what is essential, master what is essential, discard the rest. Musashi's lifelong mastery came from subtractive discipline. Walking alone requires this kind of ruthless prioritization. Principle 17. Do not fear death. This is one of Musashi's core doctrines, present throughout Five Rings and Dokkōdō. For Musashi, fear of death is the ultimate limiter because it distorts perception and corrupts action. To understand this principle, you need to examine what fear of death actually means. Most people don't fear the cessation of consciousness. They fear loss of future plans, loss of identity, loss of status, loss of unfinished potential, loss of control, loss of narrative continuity, loss of what they think life owes them. Musashi is demanding that you detach from these illusions. A person who does not fear death acts cleanly. Their judgment becomes pure because nothing can be taken from them. The strategic implications are profound. If you do not fear the end of life, then no short-term discomfort, humiliation, uncertainty, or conflict can meaningfully destabilize you. Fear of death is the root of all other fear. Cut it, and the others fall. Modern relevance of people rarely face literal death, but the psychological equivalents appear constantly. Fear of career loss, fear of relationship breakdown, fear of social judgment, fear of failure, fear of discomfort. All are small deaths. Musashi's principle is to move through them without shrinking. Walking alone demands that you stop bargaining with fear. Principle 18. Do not seek to possess either goods or fiefs for your old age. Musashi is not telling you to avoid financial planning. He is attacking the mindset that tries to build comfort as insulation against life. Goods and fiefs represented wealth, land, retirement, security. Musashi rejects this because it encourages people to live now for a future that may never arrive. The principle is not anti-wealth, it is anti-clinging. Musashi lived transiently. He fought, he traveled, he taught, he wandered. He didn't accumulate because accumulation shifts the orientation of life toward protection rather than engagement. The modern interpretation: if your mental stability relies on future security, you are psychologically fragile. A person who needs a certain future becomes incapable of confronting a volatile present. This principle trains the mind to be stable without guarantees. It is not an instruction to be reckless. It is an instruction to avoid psychological dependence on a projected future. Principle 19. Respect Buddha and the gods without counting on their help. Musashi lived within a deeply religious culture. Buddhism and Shinto were woven into every layer of life. Musashi respected the spiritual dimension, but his rule is clear. Respect does not mean outsourcing responsibility. The principle is about autonomy of action. Counting on divine help creates passivity. It becomes an excuse for inaction or for avoiding ownership of outcomes. Musashi is saying, recognize the sacred, honor the transcendent, but act as though no one is coming to save you. Modern translation: appreciate spirituality, engage with meaning, consider higher order dimensions, but do not expect external salvation, spiritual, institutional, or interpersonal. This is Musashi's commitment to radical self-reliance. Principle 20. You may abandon your own body, but you must preserve your honor. Honor is not reputation. Honor is alignment with your own principles. A person can lose status, wealth, mobility, physical strength, but if they abandon their principles, everything collapses. Musashi's instruction is simple. Your body is temporary. Your principles are what define your path. To preserve honor means act according to your deepest values. Do not betray your commitments. Do not compromise out of convenience. Withstand pressure. Prioritize integrity over comfort. Musashi understood that the body fails, but the consequences of dishonor echo through one's entire life. Modern interpretation: honor equals coherence between what you claim to value and how you actually behave. Walking alone requires this coherence. Without it, you're simply drifting. Principle 21. Never stray from the way. This final principle is simultaneously the simplest and the heaviest. The way, the do, is not a set of rules but a direction. The path of internal clarity, discipline, autonomy, and self-governance. To stray from the way means to abandon deliberate living, to fall back into desire, distraction, fear, or imitation, to be pulled by external currents rather than walking your own path. Musashi ends here because this is the integrating rule. All other principles serve this one: to stay on the way, maintain clarity, sustain discipline, reject unnecessary attachment, act from principle, not impulse, move through the world with independence of mind. Hold fast to your chosen orientation regardless of circumstance. This is why Musashi called it the way of walking alone, not isolation, not loneliness, but sovereignty. Taken together, these 21 principles form a single structure, a philosophy of continuity, not continuity of circumstance, but continuity of self, across the changing conditions of later life. Each principle describes a point where an individual can reclaim authorship over perception, over meaning, over pace, over fear, over identity itself. The common thread is agency. Quiet agency, not loud. Agency that works without proclamation. Older adults often discover that the external world begins to minimize them. Culturally, socially, economically, digitally. Yet internally, agency remains intact. The capacity to think, to choose, to reinterpret, to direct attention, to redirect emotional energy, to cultivate a stable inner reality, none of this diminishes with age. What changes is the world's recognition of it. These principles, taken as one, reawaken the individual's recognition of it. The synthesis is this: aging is not a process of reduction, it is a process of refinement. At younger ages, identity is broad, diffuse, porous, reactive. With age, identity can become deliberate, distilled. Forces that were once destabilizing, social comparison, external validation, longing for speed, fear of being overlooked, lose some of their authority. They become negotiable, contingent, optional. Each principle addresses a different axis of control: how time is experienced, how attention is allocated, how emotion is transformed, how the past is interpreted, how the future is conceptualized, how relationships are structured, how mortality is understood, how meaning is constructed. These are not small axes. They are the foundational variables of human consciousness, and each principle repositions the individual from passive participant to active curator. The philosophy that emerges is not one of optimism or sentimentality. Rather, it is one of structural clarity. It says, if you can't control the wider world, then control the lens through which you experience it. That lens becomes the center of gravity from which stability emerges. Under that lens, aging becomes an epistemic shift. The self knows more, the self sees more, the self recognizes patterns that were invisible in youth. The self becomes less threatened by uncertainty. It becomes less seduced by petty urgency, becomes less vulnerable to external noise, and it becomes more capable of alignment with its own values, its own rhythm, its own interpretation of what a day should be. Philosophically, this is the movement from the unexamined life to the chosen life. Not a life chosen by removing difficulty, but a life chosen by redesigning one's internal stance toward that difficulty. When viewed as a single doctrine, the 21 principles form a structured approach to late life sovereignty. Sovereignty over thought, sovereignty over emotional patterns, sovereignty over pace, sovereignty over narrative, sovereignty over self. Nothing here asks the individual to become more than they are. Instead, each principle reveals the power already present, but previously unfocused. In the moment that power is recognized, the architecture of aging changes from one of decline to one of possession. Possession of attention, possession of meaning, possession of the self. So as you lie in bed, or rest in your chair, or sit quietly with the soft shadows of the room around you, let these principles settle into you, not as a list, not as lessons to memorize, but as reminders of the strength you already carry. You've lived long enough to know what matters and what doesn't. You've seen enough cycles to recognize that worry has a short life, that pressure fades, that other people's opinions evaporate faster than they arrive. You've earned the right to live at your own pace, to choose your own meaning, to reclaim your own story. Age has not taken these things from you. It has delivered them to you. Tonight, let your breath slow, let your shoulders release, let your thoughts drift without urgency. You've done more than enough for one lifetime, more than enough for one day. Let the world spin without you for a moment. It will still be there tomorrow, but right now, this moment belongs to you. A quiet mind, a steady heart, a life experienced from the inside out. And when you're ready, allow yourself to drift, to sleep, to rest, or simply to stillness.